Welcome back. This session's method is called unprovoked happiness to contrast it with normal happiness. Normal happiness is provoked happiness. The idea is that you do something or something happens and happiness results from that. Maybe your partner buys you something and surprises you, or perhaps you get the new car you've been wanting, or whatever. Essentially, something happens from the outside and an increase in happiness results from the inside. Unprovoked happiness, by contrast, is happiness that just happens. It just is. The unprovoked happiness method has a few key elements to it. Primarily, it's about reaching a certain type of perceptual shift called a pure conscious experience, or PCE. Usually, a PCE is reached by focusing on a certain type of visual perception, but any form of sensory perception works because optimally, these types of experiences involve all of the senses. So the initial one or two that you focus on, which are usually vision and sound for most people, can best be thought of as gateways into the experience. The doorway to induce one of these experiences is to actively direct your attention in the present moment or by richly remembering previous events to specific sensuous elements of something. Now, this might include focusing on one or more of the following in relation to an object: perfection, delight, wonder, euphoric happiness, equanimity or imperturbability, safety, innocence, immediacy, and or felicity. Doing this can be referred to as attentive sensuousness. In the end, the experience of a PCE should include all of these and more, but you only need to find the one or two that you can use to enter the experience. Everyone will have their own best doorway. Yours might be a sense of visual wonder, while someone else's might be a sense of auditory delight. Differences in the doorways occur between different people because of what they focus on and how they're wired and so on. For one person, it might be soap bubbles. For another person, flowers or a certain type of flower. For another, music, and so on. It's also important to consider the different forms that something can take. So perhaps your doorway is water. Well, there are many different types of water that may or may not work for you. Perhaps for you, it's a placid lake, but for someone else, it's the ocean or a flowing river or a waterfall, or even just water running out of the faucet. The general idea is to find something that you find highly sensuous and pleasurable to watch, listen to, taste, touch, or smell, and focus on one or more of the previously mentioned qualities while you enjoy it. A common example that is used with this method is soap bubbles. There's a video on the page below that has been a popular video for many of the programs that we've run up to this point. Now, a key element of this method is getting beyond the mind and its classifications and categories, getting down to a raw, sensual experience. The theory is that when you do this, the positivity and pleasurable feeling, often referred to as felicity in this method, are waiting for you, that they just emerge. If you think about it, soap bubbles are quite magical. There's a reason why kids love them so much. When you really pay attention to them, they're visually beautiful. They seem to come into existence, float around in magical ways, and disappear as quickly as they came. If you have a bunch of them in a sink, they even have a sound associated with them. It's like there are hundreds or thousands of little bubbles all chatting with each other as they flit in and out of existence. If you can see them through a child's eyes, which is one way to think about this shift in perception that's involved with this method, they are truly capable of evoking felicitous fascination and wonder. Your goal is to find perceptual objects that can produce this experience for you. That can take you out of and beyond the mind, just like with the rest of the course. What most easily produces this will probably be unique to you. For many people, this is easier in or with nature. So it can be common for people to to use plants and trees and flowers and so on. However, the reality is that once this form of perception sets in, it occurs everywhere. So the doorways are everywhere as well, even in places you might not suspect. For example, consider a pile of laundry. Your mind has a lot of associations with that, doesn't it? Things like dirty, smelly, maybe a chore to do, and so on. However, this, like everything else, can be viewed from the standpoint of this other way of seeing things. Imagine you had no idea what a pile of laundry was if you were an alien who had never seen humanity and was seeing a pile of laundry for the very first time. Or imagine that you'd never seen it before and someone framed it as art that was designed to provoke a positive mental state. You'd have a sense of curiosity around it, wouldn't you? You'd have a sense of wonder about it. You could easily find it to be quite beautiful. All the colors, the shadows, the different shades of light, the way it was layered, and so on. The ordinary person's mind doesn't think this way about a pile of laundry, but it can absolutely be experienced this way. So during this session, you're trying to put your focus on things in this sensuousness and attentive way and produce a pronounced shift in your perception, which brings along with it a shift in your consciousness. Ultimately, you want to get enough access to this state for your brain to habituate it and for you to enter fundamental well-being in ways that relate to it. This means that although you will do this practice for 30 to 60-minute blocks of time each day during this session, you should also do it as much as you remember to throughout the rest of your day. Remember, everything can be a doorway to it. People often wonder how to think about this. How do you integrate this into your life? Ordinarily, it doesn't feel like you're looking at a single object and trying to elicit a sense of felicitousness from it. In one sense, that's true. Most people don't do that. But I want you to consider two things. First, that looking often feels more intentful than it actually is. Looking or listening is one of those things that often feels highly associated with your agency, will, or intent. They feel like active processes. But how much of that is actually true? When you first open your eyes in the morning, do you have to will yourself to see? Of course not. You just see. Do you have to will yourself to hear? Of course not. You just hear. Our sensory processes are actually automatic for the most part. Although we often feel like it's the opposite, the reality is that we go through most of our day with them on autopilot, just trusting them. This can be an important thing to consciously realize. One of those things that truly shifts your perception of yourself when it truly dawns on you. Second, for the most part, your vision, hearing, and so forth only pay attention to one thing at a time. They may pay attention to many things in a very short period, and sometimes what they are paying attention to is a composite scene, but pretty much it's still just one thing at a time. There's no reason that can't be sensuously attentive, right? In terms of how you're paying attention to that one thing. Laundry, garbage, and many other things that we don't usually find to be felicitous can be when experienced outside of and beyond our normal ideas and concepts about them. So it can pretty much anything else you'll experience. So, people have profound mystical experiences in the midst of battle with people dying from hideous wounds all around them and in the grocery store. So if you're wondering how a PCE-like experience can integrate itself into everyday experience, that's how. Before we move on, let's get more specific and walk through the steps of how to generate a PCE. First, you focus in and you narrow your focus to something you consider to be perfect or delightful, like a soap bubble or whatever you think that may be for you. You develop an innocent and sincere, almost childlike appreciation of being alive while perceiving it. This is the cognitive and perceptual shift you're looking for. The second thing you do as you narrow your focus to this bubble is to try to perceive everything that is knowable about it. Not just think about it, just perceive it. The texture of it, the color, the size. Is it a tiny bubble? Is it a medium-sized bubble? Is it a big bubble? What's the smell of the soap bubble? Gather all of the information you can about that bubble. And don't do this in a way that your mind categorizes all of these things. You're not trying to get symbolic answers to these questions. You're just trying to use these questions to become aware of as much detail in the experience as you can. By doing this, you become deeply engaged in an attentive and sensuous appreciation of a very simple thing, a soap bubble. This should feel delightful. The shackles of thought and of feeling should fall away the more you go into it. And what arises instead is delight and wonder. In this space, you're probably feeling quite good. Okay, so the next thing that you will do, now that you've developed an attentive sensuousness in relation to the bubble, is that you will pay attention to how you are paying attention. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your skin, they're encoded with a methodology. Seeing is not just seeing. There's a way in which we see. There's a way in which we hear. What does it mean to now engage one's own sensual collection of information, if you will? To look at that, what does it mean to see the bubble? How do the eyes see the bubble? How do the ears perceive it? How does the nose smell it? Not how in technical terms. We're not talking here about a technical mechanism. This is not a question about anatomy. This is about asking a question of the eye or the ear. It's about revealing the way in which sense data is collected and made to seem cohesive, when in fact, it's really not cohesive. For example, if you can develop the faculty of noticing how your eyes are seeing things, not just seeing, but noticing how the seeing is happening, then you'll know that every single moment your eye and your brain is scanning visual information. Literally, that each nanosecond, a different aspect of what can be seen is emphasized by the brain. We operate under a kind of illusion of a cohesive solidity that doesn't actually exist. The ability to perceive how you're perceiving, called apperception, will reveal the nature of endless micro-events that are arising and passing away in your moment-to-moment experience. When you've worked through these various steps in order to experience this kind of cognitive and perceptual shift, your experience of being alive will become as innocent and whimsical and delightful and sincere as a child's. Your everyday experience of laundry, of traffic, of bill paying, of washing dishes all become part of the magical unfolding of being alive. Without the filter of thought, without the filter of feeling, things are actual. They are themselves, and not the things we imagine them to be. In themselves, they're delightful. All of your sensuous and attentive capabilities, in a way, are heightened. When that happens, and all the other stuff isn't there, you aren't thinking about your cell phone, you aren't thinking about your future worries, you aren't thinking about whatever sorts of things one thinks about, even one's neurotic demons will take a rest. You aren't thinking about that either, and you are literally just existing. You have a sense almost as if you're on vacation all the time. Okay, so the core part of the method is to increasingly learn to experience PCEs. The originator of this method believed that everyone had experience of PCEs over the course of their life, but that most people do not recall them. For those who do, he believed that memories could be used to generate PCEs in the present moment. The idea was to simply recall the PCEs from the past, or one at a time, of course, and really focus on them to the point where the memory was so strong that it was as if they were being re-experienced again. He felt that this conditioned the nervous system to start having them more in real time. So if that's something that seems possible for you, go for it. I think that many people don't remember having this type of experience and thus find that type of instruction frustrating and unhelpful. So definitely don't let it stress you out if you put yourself in that category. Just work the rest of the system as covered here. Another key part of this method involves the following phrase. How am I experiencing this moment of being alive? There are two ways that this phrase is used within this method. First, it's used to uncover when the last time was that you were experiencing a PCE. The general idea is that these should become more habituated over time, and that beliefs and psychological triggers are what pull people out of them. So, by asking this question, you can see if you're in a PCE, and if you're not, it's suggested that you go back to the last time you were in one and try to figure out what pulled you out of it, and then do some psychological work around releasing that belief or trigger. The second way to use this method, this phrase, is to get your brain to deeply probe how you're experiencing the present moment. It's just a slightly different way of interpreting the word how. Rather than taking it to ask if you are in a PCE or not, instead you're literally asking, how is experience happening right now? Ultimately, this is meant to point back to data from the senses. You're seeing, you're hearing, and so on. That's literally how you're experiencing. If you're caught up in thoughts, it could be that you're thinking or feeling or remembering. That's fine too, as long as you think of it from that perspective and are not caught up in the contents of it. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad thoughts, just that you recognize that in this moment, it is thoughts that are how you're experiencing this way of being alive. Of course, it's rarely just one of these things. Viewed this way, the question is asking you to remember and notice the way that you are alive through your sense data and to bring your attention back to your sense data. It's a reminder that without this, there is no experience of being alive. It's a question that is designed to cut to and bring your attention to the core of what you notice as existence. Once your attention is back on the senses, you can resume your practice of attentive sensuousness. So, this is the practice for this session. One thing to keep in mind is that it is a bit like the group awareness exercise. Some people are going to take to it right away and love it. For others, it's going to be a struggle, and the rest are going to fall somewhere in between. Remember not to stress yourself out with any of these exercises, especially one like this that's built around things like a sense of wonder. Just relax, give it a try, compare notes with your fellow group members, and see how it goes. Okay, that's it for this video. Keep up the great work. You're really doing awesome, and I'll see you next time.